big news. A great way to introduce your massive $1.1 million signing. A world record fee for Naomi Girma from San Diego Wave was announced Sunday.
Paraded in front of Arsenal's bench. Hey.
Yeah, it was sassy. It was definitely sassy. But also, there was a lot of fans there who didn't actually see the announcement taking place because they'd not yet reached their seats, because a lot of fans obviously arrive either dead on when the match is going to start, or they're having a bit of a mess around, getting a couple of beers and like trying to finish those off before the game starts. They're about 5 minutes late. So a lot of people did not see Naomi Girma come out, wave in the rain, and then go back in again. Yeah, it was it was a bit wild.
It felt like it was more for Arsenal's benefit than anything else. Get her out there, parade in front of them and be like, you missed out.
It was that. And then we had Alex Scott joking about Arsenal sending her to convince Girma she should join them, which was super, super funny.
Didn't work.
I mean, clearly, I think that was what the sass was about. But listener Steph has asked us on Instagram, will Girma's signing bring more big players to other WSL teams to even out the playing field? What do we think?
I mean, it has to. Chelsea are pushing the limits of the game. Not the limits, but like pushing the game.
The financial limits.
Every year they're making more steps. And I think if other teams want to keep up, they have to follow their lead. And in the same vein that Arsenal of old were leading the way. But I do think when you hear things from Jonas Eidevall that Arsenal couldn't afford Viv and Caldente, it makes you wonder whether they're actually willing to splash the cash, because those top clubs can't afford to.
I think more NWSL players. I do think we're going to see more NWSL players go into the WSL, but I also think we're going to have the same thing, and we've already seen it with a lot of WSL players go. I think the NWSL and the WSL are effectively going to be like transfer buddies, I think, for like the foreseeable future, because both leagues are just so strong.
It's a lot.
100% in terms of the infrastructure now, and they obviously play each other quite a bit. There's great exposure out there. There's great investment. So I think these two leagues are going to become best buds. I wouldn't actually be surprised, obviously, based on the fact that we had the WSL clubs going out to the NWSL and playing those kind of like sort of promotion matches, if we don't see the NWSL sides coming out to the WSL, possibly not this year, given that we've got the Euros, but maybe following the following year when we don't really have that much on, which would be great. So the fee surpassed the previous world record of $860,000 that BFC paid for Rachel Kunandaji in February last year. Do we think this is a massive moment for Girma, given that as a defender, she's the first person to break that $1 million boundary?
It makes it all the more impressive that it's a defender that did it. But if you look at her individual honours, US Soccer Player of the Year 2023, she was also the US Young Soccer Player of the Year in 2020, NWSL Defender of the Year in 22 and 23, NWSL Rookie of the Year in 2022, NWSL Best 11 22 and 23, and she was in the FIFA 11 in 2024. And that's just her individual honours. Never mind like winning gold medal and playing every minute at the Olympics. Like, that's insane. So she's like 24.
I knew she was talented, but when you've listed off like something like that, I'm like,
yeah,
defender.
Speechless.
What? What? How old is she?
24.
24?
Yeah. So you can understand why, Emma Hayes says she's the best defender in the world, and maybe no surprise that she's ended up at Chelsea. I'm sure Emma was like, go on.
I think this is a long time
you
in the
look
making.
Great in blue.
There's been a lot of like clips that have come over about like Millie Bright and like Lucy Bronze, like for the last USA game, like sort of like chuckling together and kind of like, yeah, I heard you're coming, hon, can't wait to have you, but also like, don't take our jobs. Chelsea definitely have a history of making landmark signings. Beth England, Erin Cuthbert, Pernille Harder, Natalie Bjorn, Mara Mjelde and Sam Kerr, to name a few. And of course, Chelsea set the British transfer record in signing Mara Ramirez for £384,000 in January last year. There's a lot of money being banded around in Chelsea at the moment. They beat off Lyon, reportedly offering Girma higher wages and were prepared to match the transfer fee, but her preference was for Chelsea. Why do you think that was? Chelsea over Lyon? Better exposure, maybe?
Maybe two great clubs. I was going to say maybe a little bit more competitive, but Chelsea sitting 10 points clear of Arsenal. I think that maybe isn't the case at the moment. But
interesting from like a European honours though.
Yeah,
like
but even like it could be down to really easy things like moving away from home.
Yeah,
is it going to be easier to go to a country that speaks English?
Yeah, could have been
that could be reducing it massively. I'm sure there's lots of things that come into it, but like players that she knows, like little things, I'm sure comes into it because she had a lot of offers. So I imagine it's quite difficult to choose.
Well, I think Emma Hayes kind of called it last year that there was sort of a Girma-shaped shadow on the horizon when she said that she was the world's best centre-back.
And then Buchanan got injured.
Yeah. And then given obviously the accolades that you've just reeled off, you can see why she came to that incredibly accurate analysis. Many now think that the WSL title race, is already decided, but will Girma be key to Chelsea securing European glory this season? Do you think that is why she has been on the target list for so long? She's what's going to do it.
Well, I don't think Girma is the reason why the title race is now over. I think Chelsea have managed that without her thus far.
You're joking? Like, she turned up for 5 minutes late. You think she's not integral? That's what.
It's very hard to put all of that onto one player. I think they wanted to bring in world class to deal with Buchanan being injured. It gives them more depth in that area. She's a winner. It's just another little piece of the puzzle, I guess, for Chelsea to make that, because like it's not as simple as winning the Champions League is bloody hard. It's not that the league is easier to win or anything, but you know who your competitors are. Like with the Champions League, you get your group and then you don't know who you're going to face going forward, and then everything feels a bit like a cup game once you get into the knockout stages. So it's a different beast. So it's very hard to just bring in one player and be like, we figured out how to win the Champions League now, but she will be integral, especially depth-wise as they go further into competitions.
I think that was going to be my point. It's the depth that it adds to, I think, like to do so well in so many like different competitions throughout the year and to kind of not get that fatigue, the injuries and things like that. It is the depth point. And Girma, but you've already got a great back line. You didn't need Girma. It wasn't essential that you got Girma. It's the same way it wasn't even essential that you had Lucy Bronze. But like here you are just splashing flipping cash into the women's football ecosystem. Like,
we had a good chat now beforehand in terms of like the money and does anything need to be done about that? Like, on one hand, should Chelsea be punished for being willing to invest heavily in their women's teams? Won't that force other teams to do the same? Or what you were saying in terms of how we manage that for a more sustainable league, and to try and maybe we're gone too far into this, but to try and not have teams entirely relying on the men's teams.
I mean, Girma was bad enough. If you get then Trinity Rodman joining Chelsea in this transfer window, people are going to kick off, because I think like you have such a strong squad that it affects the competitiveness of the league. It just looks like a runaway, and it already is. So I don't think you're going to have that kind of engaged audience. It's like, well, next year Chelsea were just going to win it, so everyone's just fighting for Champions League spots and not getting relegated. I think the financial viability point is a really important one, because I think when you've got a club like Chelsea that obviously has quite a large amount of money at its disposal and can go out and buy these players where there is no kind of cap there, then you can just create a really uncompetitive spot. I would never really advocate for women's players' wages being capped, or anyone's wages being capped, really. I do think like we live in a capitalist market, like you can't. But at the same time, if you're going to make a women's football future that is financially viable, and the women's game at the moment is so heavily reliant on the Premier League clubs that they're attached to, they're not making enough money to pay their players by themselves. So what you then have is a situation like your Coventries, like your Readings, where actually the clubs go bust and you can't afford to pay Girma's wages anymore. But if you're doing it slowly and incrementally and doing it in a place that your club is still profitable, then you do need some kind of cap here to kind of regulate that and not get yourself into a space where, like the Premier League, a lot of those clubs are not profitable and really are operating quite poorly.
Playing devil's advocate here.
Don't do that.
Because people will ask this question, do you not think it forces other clubs' hands to invest more?
It does, but then you still get into a situation where the women's sides are going to be heavily reliant on the men's clubs, because if you've got like a Palace, you could say, well, Palace are a Premier League club. They have enough money to be able to afford a greater and bigger roster of more impressive players who are on higher wages. But Palace aren't seeing hundreds of thousands of people go down to their games and buy their merchandise and whatever it is. So profitability-wise, the clubs aren't making any profit. I think Arsenal and Chelsea are just about breaking even. Like, the wage bill for Arsenal and Chelsea must be in the millions, but the club isn't making that. The women's club isn't making that. So that over-reliance for me just feels scary. So we either create a space where we do cap it so that we get to a space of financial viability in future, or we don't cap it and we just see a space of the women's game getting into exactly the same mess that the men's game has.
There you go. I wanted to give you your soapbox moment.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear what our listeners think.
Occasionally that makes sense, and
you often do.
Weird. It's very
just when you say the weird things in the middle that then you lose the really clever stuff you've said, and then you'll say things like oiling your hips, and everyone's like, "What?"
Yeah, I did say that. Don't take the audience back there, Christ. Let's talk about transfers historically since you've been covering the game, Rach, and obviously since I was a player. many, many moons ago. What were the biggest transfers you remember back in the day?
Chelsea have done some good ones, obviously, with the likes of Kirby. I think off the back of the 2015 World Cup,
Yes.
she was like one of the big signings. I wonder if she was the first to kind of go over the 100,000 or whether I'm just completely making that up. I might be. I also, what often stands out to me was when Man City came into the top league. And, you know, they started bringing in like Steph, Jill Scott, Tony Duggan, Nikita Paris.
Yeah, geez, man.
And you were kind of like, oh, okay, this team is really building something here. You know, they kind of just come in, new kids on the block, and they were getting in players who obviously really believed in their plans for what they wanted to do with the club. So those ones often stick out for me as well. What about you?
I'm trying to think.
G at Chelsea is another one.
You know what I can think about is like the missed transfers, like your Russos or your Earpses. Those are the ones that stick out for me. Like, how much would they have been? Like, had Man United done their job? Those are the ones that stick in my mind, to be fair. The lost transfers, no one talks about that anymore. A question from listener Lee. He's asked, should Hannah Hampton take up during matches now that Naomi Girma has signed? Lee, rate the bants, mate. Rate the bants. I mean, someone said, was she into horse riding? Someone said
that was Millie Bright.
Was it Millie Bright? I don't know. I mean,
knitting. I bet that's difficult with goalie gloves on.
A lot of people are into crochet at the moment. That's really exploded.
But like, she'd really challenge herself by continuing to wear the goalie gloves while she does it.
Yeah, that's actually quite a nice one.
Juggling?
I mean, she could just enjoy the game, to be honest. Like, I mean, watching Naomi Girma for free every week in a prime spot is quite nice.
I'd suggest juggling. It's something I'm trying to get up to 3. I really want to learn to juggle 3 balls. So.
What should Hannah Hampton get up to in goal now that Naomi Girma... let's throw that to the floor, actually. Let us know. Can't wait for this to come through. Bad news, though. We won't be seeing her this weekend against Villa, as Bompassa has already said that she has a small injury. So, yeah. Rest up, mate. Rest up. Boredom.
Could you imagine coming from San Diego and being brought out to Stamford Bridge in that torrential downpour? I'd be like, no wonder she was only out for about 30 seconds. She'd be like, okay, bye, I'm going back.
Oh,
this is awful weather.
Bless her. To be fair, I mean, you would. When you literally walked out into like a small storm at Stamford Bridge and you were like, is this really where you play?
They should have got her one of like a Chelsea Letterman jacket or something that she could have at least had on in the rain.
They should have had the Antonia Bronze, a jacket designed like that to bring her out. That would have been iconic. But you know, next time when Trinity Rodman comes.